The man across the table asks you a simple question. He's CIA. You know this because you are CIA, or you were, or you are. This is actually the problem. The question is, what is your name? And you sit there in a room in Virginia that smells like carpet cleaner and vending machine coffee. And you know the answer. You have several answers. And you can't figure out which one he's asking for. Let's start over. No, let's not start over. Let's start in the middle. Because that's where the interesting part is. The beginning is a recruitment story. You have heard 100 of those. Guy gets stabbed, guy goes through training, guy gets a legend and a passport and a handshake and a good luck. That's everyone's beginning. That's not your story. Your story is the moment in year 6, Beirut. A rooftop, cigarette smoke, and the call to prayer drifting up from somewhere below. When Hassan turns to you and says something about his daughter's wedding, and you realize you're not pretending to care, you actually care. You want to go to the wedding, you want to meet his daughter, you want to eat the food and shake hands and sit in a plastic chair and watch people dance. And then 5 seconds later you remember that Hassan runs a weapons pipeline through southern Turkey, and you have a dead drop 2 blocks from here with a film canister full of everything he told you last Thursday. Those 2 facts don't cancel each other out. That's the thing. They just coexist. The way 2 radio stations overlap when you are between cities, both playing, neither one clear. Your handler, a guy named Landry, never met him in person, just a voice on a phone that called every 11 days from a number that changed every time. Landry would ask you for updates, operational status, source reliability assessments. How's your cover holding? Your cover is fine, you would tell him. What you never told Landry, your cover stopped being a cover somewhere around year 4. Not because anyone blew it, because you grew into it like a bone heals around a screw. The screw is still foreign. The bone just stops noticing. Okay, the man in the room in Virginia. He's waiting. Your real name is Daniel Marsh. Born in Fairfax, father was an engineer at Raytheon, mother taught 2nd grade, and you had a dog named Captain who died when you were 14 and cried for 2 days, and your father told you to get it together. You joined the Marines out of high school because your grades weren't good enough for the schools your father wanted, and you needed to stop being in that house. You did 2 tours, you were fine at it, not great, fine. Good enough that a man with no insignia sat across from you in a mess hall in Camp Lejeune and asked if you spoke any Arabic. Some, you said. You had picked it up. Ear for it. He said, how would you feel about growing that out? He meant the Arabic. He also meant everything else. That was 2005, 21 years ago. And Daniel Marsh hasn't existed since 2007. Not really. Not in any way that would be recognizable to the kid who cried over a dog in Fairfax. The man you became, Tariq Haddad, Lebanese Canadian, import business, split time between Beirut and Istanbul. He's more real than Daniel ever was. Tariq has 17 years of tax returns. Tariq has a landlord who knows his coffee order. Tariq has friends who would miss him. Tariq sat at Hassan's table and broke bread and laughed at Hassan's joke and meant it. Daniel has a handler who calls every 11 days and a file in a building he's sitting right now. So when the man across the table says, what is your name? The honest answer is, I don't know which one you want. And I'm not sure which one I'd give you if I did. Here's the thing that happened in your year 9. You had a source inside Syrian military intelligence, not someone you recruited. He was inherited from a previous officer who rotated out. His code name was Castle. Real name, you never learned. You met him once a month at a hotel in Antakya, Turkish side of the border. He'd cross over a medical visa. You would sit in a room on the 3rd floor and he would talk for 90 minutes and you'd memorize everything. Because paper is evidence, and evidence gets people killed. Castle was scared every time, hands shaking, voice tight, but he kept coming because he believed that the information he gave you would prevent something. A strike, a massacre, a chemical attack. He believed this because you told him so. You don't know if that is true. You passed the intelligence to Landry. Landry passed it up the chain. The chain disappeared into rooms you didn't have access to. Maybe it prevented something. Maybe it sat in a file. Maybe someone read it and decided the political cost of acting was higher than the human cost of not acting. You don't know. You will never know. That's the architecture. In year 9, Castle stopped coming, missed the first meeting, missed the backup. You activated the emergency protocol, a chalk mark on a wall near a specific pharmacy in Antakya, and waited. Nothing. 3 months later, through a contact in Turkish intelligence, you learned he had been arrested. Someone inside Syrian intel had been running a mole hunt for 2 years. Castle was interrogated for 6 weeks. You don't know what happened after that. You know what usually happens after that. And knowing that is enough to keep you awake on specific nights, when the wind sounds a certain way, and you are alone, and there is nothing between you and the thoughts. You filed a report. Landry said these things happen. The tone was the same tone someone uses when they tell you the flight's been delayed. Administrative, procedural, these things happen. You sat in your apartment in Beirut that night. You looked at the wall and you thought, I sent that man to his death, or I didn't. There is no way to determine which, and the system is designed so that I will never know, because knowing would require someone to be responsible. And responsibility is so divided in this system that no individual can be blamed. That was the thought. Clean, precise, a company man's thought. And then immediately after, Hassan's daughter is getting married next Saturday and you need to buy a gift. Both thoughts, same head, no contradiction, no guilt, just 2 radio stations, both playing. Year 12, Istanbul. This is where it gets complicated, or more complicated, depending on where you think the baseline was. You meet a woman named Elif. She teaches literature at Bogazici University. You meet her at a bookshop in Kadikoy, because you actually go to bookshops, not as a cover, because Tariq likes books and you are Tariq, remember? And the distinction between what Tariq likes and what Daniel likes dissolved somewhere around year 5, like sugar in hot water. Try separating them now. You can't. The sugar is water. Elif is smart in a way that makes you nervous, which hasn't happened in a long time. She asks questions that have more questions underneath them. She notices things. When you change the subject, when your hands go still, when you answer too quickly. After 4 months, she says, you are not exactly who you say you are. And your training says, deflect, redirect, assess the threat. And some other part of you, the part that has been underwater for 12 years and is running out of whatever it is that you run out of, that part says, no, I'm not. You don't tell her everything. You're not insane. You tell her enough. You tell her you have another name. You tell her the import business is real, but it's not all that's real. You tell her there are some parts of your life she can't see. She sits with this for a while. You watch her face. You are trained to read faces, micro-expressions, stress indicators, deception tells. But you are not reading her face professionally. You're reading it the way a man reads a face of a woman he's afraid of losing. She says, I don't need to know everything. I just needed to know that something was there. And you sit there thinking, I have just committed a career-ending security violation. And also, this is the most honest I've been with another human being since 2007. You don't report this to Landry. Of course you don't. Landry would pull you out. Landry would end Tariq. And Tariq has a new life now. Tariq has Elif. Tariq has Hassan's friendship, and a landlord who knows his coffee order, and a flat in Kadikoy with books on the shelves, and a woman who knows he's not entirely what he seems and chose to stay anyway. Daniel has a handler who calls every 11 days. Ask yourself honestly, which one of these men would you choose to be? Year 15. The call comes. Not Landry. Landry rotated out 2 years ago. New handler. A woman, younger voice. She says they are pulling you out. The operation has been deemed complete. 18 months of transition. New identity, resettlement. You say, I need more time. She says, the decision's been made. You hang up. You sit in your apartment, Tariq's apartment, and you look at the books on the shelf and Elif's jacket over the chair, and the coffee cup she used this morning is still on the counter. 18 months. You think about what happens if you go back. A debrief, a medal, maybe. A classified commendation in a file nobody reads. A new name in a new city. Some suburb in Virginia or Maryland where you will mow a lawn and go to grocery store and make small talk with neighbors who will never know that you spent 15 years as someone else and that someone else was more you than you were ever. You think about what happens if you don't go back. If Daniel Marsh just stays dead. If Tariq Haddad keeps living his life. If you never answer the phone again. You think about this for 3 days. On the 4th day, you answer the phone. Because that's what the training does. Not the surveillance training. Or the dead drop training. The deeper training. The one that happened before Langley. The one your father installed when he told a 14-year-old boy crying over a dead dog to get it together. The training that says what you feel is not what you do. What you do is what you were told. You start the transition. 18 months later, Virginia. The room, the carpet cleaner smell, the vending machine coffee. The man across the table has been patient. He asks you your name and you haven't answered, and he's just sitting there, pen on the pad, waiting. You look at him. He's maybe 35, clean-shaved. He probably has a wife and a commute and a lawn and a life that fits inside the shape his life is supposed to be. He's never had 2 names. He's never sat at a table with a man he genuinely loves while knowing that tomorrow he'll put that man's weapon roots in a dead drop 2 blocks away. He's never told a woman a fraction of the truth and felt more whole than he did telling anyone the full story of the lie. You could say Daniel. That's what the file says. That's what the birth certificate says. That's the name your mother used. You could say Tariq. That's who you were for longer. That's who Elif knew. That's who Hassan trusted. And that's who had a life. But here's the thing you have been circling for the last hour. The thing the man across the table doesn't understand because he's never been where you have been. There is no answer. Not because you're confused, because the question is wrong. Which side are you on? Assumes there are 2 sides and you're standing on one of them, but you're not standing on either side. You're standing in the middle. You have been in the middle for so long that the middle is the only solid ground you know. The sides are abstractions. The middle is where you ate dinner and fell in love and betrayed people and meant well and caused harm and actually lived for 15 years. The man is still waiting. You open your mouth, you say, "Actually, no, I'm not going to tell you what you say because I don't think you know yet." And I think that's the truest thing about this whole story. 15 years undercover and you don't have an answer to the simplest question anyone can ask. What is your name? You're working on it.